What's going on, creeps? Back again for another week. I hope you're as ready as I am for this one because I've been hyping this one up enough for like 19 episodes, but it seems like you guys are all extremely hyped also on the subject matter at hand. So it seems like this should be a mutual excitement because it doesn't seem like anybody who didn't want to see Mandy hasn't seen it. But also, what I would like to go into is a little film called Beyond the Black Rainbow, which I saw maybe 2 years ago now, which was also directed by Panos Cosmatos, who directed Mandy. And this episode will be focusing on both those films and the director himself, who has a pretty interesting story in his own right for somebody who has only done like 3 interviews. I think that this was the first time he ever actually even took a movie on the festival circuit. He seems like he's a pretty big recluse, but regardless, we will move on and begin this episode on our double feature of Beyond the Black Rainbow and Mandy. So as you probably saw, I put a pretty brief review of Mandy up on our YouTube channel. Just a little tertiary response because it fucking floored me, and I just had to say something about it, but I didn't want to go too in-depth because I know it was very limited availability. But over this week, I think anybody that really, really wanted to see it could have gotten it on VOD. Because this really is something that's so different and very special. Like, comes along once in a blue moon. Like, a first-time viewing experience that, like I said, you really only get it once in a very rare while. The last time I think I remember being this surprised and excited watching a movie was when I saw Mad Max, I think, Fury Road. Alright, now if you ignored my warning to watch the movies first, or you're just unaware, let me start as I always do from the start. Little background on the director. Panos is the son of the late, great, prolific director George Cosmatos, who made such classics as the first 2 Rambo films, Tombstone, which Panos actually worked on. I think he was like a camera assistant. But since then, I think the story broke last year that it turned out that Kurt Russell was actually the person who directed the movie. And most importantly, he directed Cobra, which we will be getting into later, trust me, because it does pertain a lot to Mandy after watching both together. But as a preface and fun fact to Beyond the Black Rainbow, before we get into it, Panos actually used the residuals from these classics to fund the whole first project, which in my opinion is such a beautiful concept. It's like recycling art instead of just fucking pissing the money away like so many other people do with their family's residuals for something that they put so much heart and effort into. So right off the bat, you should want to see this fucking movie just off of that in general. So Panos' first effort, Beyond the Black Rainbow. This mindfuck of a sci-fi/horror film begins just like Mandy in 1983 with an Arborea training video, very reminiscent of the Dharma Initiative video from Lost, but it's like if it were the Dharma Initiative videos directed by David Lynch. A very grainy, drug-induced, Tony Robbins-esque facility being described by one Dr. Mercurio Arborea, who's clearly wearing a wig. Could that be significant? No, it really couldn't. It's just a wig. Afterwards, we get a phenomenal title sequence showing the names through a loop of dilating pupils, zooming out into the eyes of our heroine, Elena, who is locked inside of a cell in the facility. Walking down a hall drenched in red light, her Dr. Barry, who is also sporting a very strange haircut. I don't know, maybe this is some kind of theme here. Or whatever. The doctor and Elena have a session in a very sterile, retro/futuristic, Kubrickian interrogation room, which is a little more than the doctor taking notes, clicking the pen, and just generally torturing her and just fucking staring at her like she's an animal in a zoo. Like, again, like the fucking Kubrick end scene of 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the guy's inside of the that elegant room, and you just know that it's some form of alien zoo when he's being watched. Very weird and off-putting. So she is clearly being held here against her will, as we're seeing here, with her just sitting there being tortured and trying not to react, not answering any of his fucking insipid questions. and ignoring his childish attempts to, instigate a reaction from her. He congratulates her for this and calls this his favorite part of the day. So her non-compliance is clearly giving him a fucking raging boner. She returns to her room, and he returns to his house in his clearly overcompensating Corvette. In this scene, we really begin to see Panos' correlation to Kubrick as more than just aesthetic. Every shot inside of his home seems overly drawn out, but is actually like a meticulous look into our antagonist's life. Namely through his apparent regime of swallowing a whole bottle of pills. One swallow, one swallow, one. Very, again, off-putting. Which seems to be they seem to be some form of happy pill, but it's tough to understand what makes this weirdo happy after seeing a young woman crying did the trick for him. So I don't know. Going on the next day, they have another session, and we see that she has at least slight telekinetic abilities, and he calls her sick, stating that she is there for her own good. But just testing her abilities. Like I said, he's just fucking watching her and seeing what she can do and what she will do. Very, very unsettling and off-putting. This movie puts you in a very weird state of mind, which is cool, if you ask me. But if that's not your bag, as Austin Powers says, if that's not your bag, baby, this movie will not. You will not be into this movie. I tried showing this to someone like maybe 2 months after I'd seen it because I was like so excited about it, and it was somebody who was like a big Kubrick fan also, and they got like halfway through and they're just like, what are we watching? Turn this shit off. I don't know, maybe this really isn't one that you can appreciate as much as Mandy, but I think that you can really see a lot in Mandy to it. It's kind of like the other side of the coin to Mandy, because they both take place in 1983, and it's like Mandy is this like super like extroverted like outlandish story, and this is super introverted, but it still is just like as intense and makes you feel the same. I think that it's really interesting to watch them both back to back, but it is also very exhausting, to put it lightly, because they are both very made to induce like a bad trip while you're not on acid. Okay, and then in the next scene, it is revealed through a very nosy nurse that Dr. Barry has big plans for young Elena, because the nurse sees a journal full of pictures of Elena, along with a plethora of anatomic and scientific sketches that seem far from professional and a lot more fucking perverted. You really need to see to believe how truly disturbing the contents of this journal really are. A little hint of what is to come from our very scary Dr. Barry, who has ripped this poor, gifted girl from her mother, whom he was clearly obsessed with, and locked her up as his personal plaything, apparently, to poke and prod until the time was ripe to strike with his weird, sadistic, libertine, Machiavellian designs in this journal, seemingly believing that he can harness some psychic bond that would make him even more powerful than his initiation into the Arborea facility already did, which we get an extreme glance into in graphic detail about halfway through the film, which was ironically when my friend told me to shut this shit off. So I'll get into that when we get to it. Okay, now this first part of the test of Elena's abilities is that he gives her a picture of her mother, whom she'd never seen before, while at the same time telling that nosy nurse, who's like fucking a Stranger Things version of Nurse Ratched, that the picture is contraband and that she has to go in the room and confiscate it. So he's playing both ends against the middle there, so he can just watch the bullying nurse get iced by the teen's apparent insanely powerful telekinetic abilities, allowing her to finally exit her cell and just watching to see what she can do. It appears that his endgame has at last begun, but not before subduing her with some seriously weird and cool, like classic Doctor Who looking technology, and drenching the facility in some Evil Dead 2 backwards moving gas with a program that was titled Sentinauts. So that must be the title of his endgame, and it must be his plan to merge the two of their powers together. So he dons his suit to protect him from the gas, which was shown vividly in the sketch in his gross journal, and he begins to run his final experiment. Once it's completed, Dr. Barry takes an elevator down to the annals of the facility, where a decrepit and dying Dr. Mercurio Arborea, who is still alive, is in an empty room. A visit Barry is clearly extremely uncomfortable to make, but not because of the sad state that he's in, or because he is sad himself. To see his mentor in such a fucking pathetic state, but Barry's just seems disgusted by what Arborea has become, to say the least. And being down inside of that room with Dr. Arborea triggers Barry into the vivid memory of when Arborea gave him the dose of this hallucinatory medicine and a dip in some sort of tar pit jacuzzi, which takes him on an insane psychedelic journey, which was the only thing I could compare to the 8th episode of Twin Peaks last year. Like, it is just, it's like 10 minutes. Well, the episode of Twin Peaks was like 40 minutes of mind-blowing, just out there visuals, which are telling a story, but at the same time, they're so abstract. This is like that. This is why my friend told me to turn this shit off when I was watching it with him. It's just 10 minutes of the weird fucking psychedelic, like transitional, like epiphany state that Barry was in while he was inside of that, like, tar pit jacuzzi thing I was talking about, and he took those weird drugs. So Barry ascends from this acid nightmare as whatever the fuck he is in the present. I don't exactly know what the dip did to him, but it's clearly a lot more than the viewer has been led to believe thus far in the film. Because the first act upon leaving the pool is that he rips out the nearest nurse's throat with his teeth. And Dr. Arborea just sits back and watches, just like he did when he had Elena kill the nurse. And then Dr. Mercurio Arborea returns into the room to greet the terrifyingly newborn Barry. Also showing Arborea dipping Elena into the same tar pit jacuzzi when she was just an infant. So whatever Barry is, she must be even more of like an innate version of it, because he was like an adult when he got that dip, and she got the same treatment when she was a fucking, it seemed like maybe like a 3-month-old baby. Or maybe she was supposed to be, it was supposed to be that she was like just born, but you know, it's difficult to get a baby for a movie that's actually that small. I mean, it's pretty dangerous. I've only seen, the only movie I can really think of where they have babies that are that young is that scene where they switch all the babies' names in Once Upon a Time in America. But moving on past that. Back in the basement, Barry snaps back to the present and begins to fill a syringe with another fucking unknown substance. Maybe these drugs are all the exact same thing. Probably the same thing. It's almost definitely at least the same thing that Barry's taking in that pill form at home, because he injects it into the docile doctor, and he seems relieved afterwards. Because as soon as he is injected, a pulse of energy is shown shooting through him, Barry, and even Anna, who's still above the both of them in a weird state from that gas. Barry puts on the television and leaves the old man in a stupor in front of it. Perhaps even leaving him to die. I don't know. They don't show him again after this. But I don't think Barry had given him the supplement to die, because, I mean, he gave it to him willingly. That, like, it wasn't like he was poisoning him. I don't know. Like I said, this movie's there's a lot of guesswork in this movie. Returning up to the lab area, he rips off a slimy wig, proving that it was not a really weird Anton Chigurh-esque haircut, and he was also wearing a wig, just like the doctor was in that video in the beginning. And even stranger, he removes full colored contact lenses to reveal that his eyes are nothing but one big dilated pupil. And he just starts moaning with excitement as he puts on this other outfit and removes a little black box with a shining relic that he calls the Devil's Teardrop, which I believe is the knife that he uses. This is at home now. He finally achieves the dream every angry, weird, isolated loser like him wants to achieve, and kills his mother because he is such a big boy and she never understood him. Which would be difficult for anyone to achieve, even a freak like him. I don't think anybody would ever be able to understand him, because I most certainly don't, and they give a pretty graphic look into his life in this film. Alright, back in the lab, the weird Evil Dead Doctor Who reverse gas still has Anna hypnotized in a stasis until she finally wills herself up despite the extreme discombobulation and begins to slowly make her way through the facility, peering around every corner, terrified that she will find Barry behind each one. She finally reaches the elevator Barry used earlier and exits into a room where Barry is wearing his outfit with the helmet from before to save him from the gas so he won't get all fucked up like she is. So she slips past him and out through a vent, climbing along a set of rainbow-colored wires on her way out and into freedom. Through a room that looks like the spaceship in 2001: A Space Odyssey, where there's some other separate mutant experiment on the floor who attempts to stop her from exiting through yet another elevator, which leads her straight to another mutant guard that's in a full regalia like Barry to protect it from the gas. But she's able to use her abilities to keep the giant frozen in its tracks. Like she force hypnotizes it like Obi-Wan Kenobi. So then she heads through a normal-looking break room indicating the exit inside, and there's some Spanish on the radio that indicates that the Arboria facility is probably in Mexico or somewhere in South America, where the laws are less strict on these weird experiments and let scientists do science for the good of humanity and not the good of themselves. Okay, so opening the door, our heroine is finally out in the big world for the first time in her life. Oh, wait. It's just a greenhouse. Well, one more turn down a dark corridor and one vent shaft later, and she finally is really, really on the other side of the rainbow. Pun most certainly intended. Upon first touching the grass, she has no idea what to even do with herself. Back inside the facility, Barry enters and is somehow surprised that she had the strength to even escape. Well, he sniffs the bed and begins, touching himself and humping the bed and gets to tracking. Like a fucking gross human hunting dog. Elena's still on the outside, not knowing what to do with herself. Perhaps she's just waiting for Barry to find her, which he definitely will, since he apparently has a tracking device implanted inside of her. And in the final sequence, if you haven't seen this and you enjoy heavy music, you'll probably get a kick out of this, because two men billed as heshers are drinking and smoking weed out of beer cans. Yuck! Yuck! While listening to Angel Dust by none other than the immortal Venom. Unfortunately, these poor losers are the first to face Barry before his final confrontation with Elena, and it shouldn't come as any surprise that they are killed gruesomely. The first hilariously caught off guard while pissing, subsequently dropping his cigarette, which ashes out into his piss stream, before Barry telekinetically rips out his throat. The other is less lucky and interrogated by the deluded mutant who thinks the man had sex with Elena, fucking stroking that knife, the devil's teardrop across his neck, saying, "Yeah, you fucked her. You fucked her." It's just this poor little fat guy. And then finally, thank God, he fucking slashes down on the poor guy's fucking throat, and he's just dead. Done. And finally, Elaine and Barry are alone for their final psychic showdown, which Elena obviously wins without even any struggle or climax. She just trips Barry, basically. She allows the rest of his body to move, but holds his feet down, so he just slips and bashes his head off a rock, and he's just dead. Dead. Which was clearly the point, because it was about as flat as Boba Fett's death in Return of the Jedi, just without a Wilhelm scream, no. Wow! Wow! Well, that's the ball game as far as this film, from a surface level. I mean, as far as a deeper level goes, there could be a whole season of ball games on this one. And if you haven't seen the movie and see it after hearing this, it would probably be a totally different experience, because this is merely my takeaway from an insanely cryptic and minimalist film. I mean, you could see something completely different than I did, and if you did, by all means, let me know. Alright, well, we've covered Panos' stab at one of my two favorite genres, horror sci-fi. And now we move on to him tackling my second favorite action horror, which is a far rarer commodity. And before I start on Mandy, let me get back to what I was talking about before with Panos' dad, George, and namely his film Cobra, which opens with a red-lit silhouette of an evil man on a motorcycle, almost aesthetically identical to those Cenobites of Anarchy in Mandy. Cobra is not really an unsung movie, but I definitely think that it should be in the same conversation with like First Blood and Beverly Hills Cop as far as like a sick 80s action movie. Because like those ones are like kind of changed up the game a little bit, and this one definitely did. It just wasn't as articulate, I guess, would be the best way to put it. Because it's got this that amazing cult angle in it, which honestly makes it way more suspenseful and almost impossible to look away from. And it's got that terrifying alien hunter from the X-Files. Like, he has such a ridiculously commanding presence as the group's leader, which leads up to an amazing axe battle between him and Sly at the end. If you haven't checked that out and you liked Mandy, it's definitely a no-brainer that you check that out. I've been going through a lot of fucking dumb, fun action movies since I saw Mandy. Much like what happened after I saw Mad Max Fury Road, as I said before. It just got me really juiced on cinema, especially action cinema. And I did again. I've been watching a lot. I watched 48 Hours, another 48 Hours. Those are two of my fucking favorites. I watched a newer one, too, that I hadn't seen since I saw it in theaters, which was Bullet to the Head with Sylvester Stallone. If you haven't checked that out, you definitely should. It was Walter Hill's latest movie. The guy who directed fucking The Warriors and 48 Hours. He produced Alien and Tales from the Crypt. Bullet to the Head is just... It's in the same vein as these... just ridiculous action movies. Like, it doesn't really matter exactly what the story is as long as there's fucking flamboyant characters driving it around and, like, bringing it to some fucking ridiculous climax. And the reason I mentioned Bullet to the Head is because that also ends with an axe battle with fucking Sylvester Stallone, which I loved. Alright, all foreplay aside, now let's get into this. Brass tacks. Mandy starts with a very powerful log-cutting sequence, showing our main character Red as a lumberjack with an unknown past. So after we see him cut down some trees in a very cool sequence, he's transported back to the Shadow Mountains via helicopter, where he looks very uncomfortable. So perhaps he served in some capacity in Vietnam. I mean, it would sync up since this also takes place in 1983, like Black Rainbow, like I said earlier. So I think that there's a good chance that he was a Vietnam vet, with how he looked in that helicopter, and something else I'll mention later. But that is neither here nor there in the scheme of things. And all of this is shown over a fucking amazing song by Crimson King. I'd never heard it. I mean, King Crimson. I'd never fucking heard it before, but it was such a fucking amazing title sequence with that, with the fucking trees falling down to it and shit like that, him in the helicopter to it. It was fucking beautiful. And he ends with the introduction of the title cards, which we get throughout the film. The first being a very glossy one. The first title card being a very glossy and blue and sparkly, reading Shadow Mountains, 1983, inviting us into this world we are certainly not prepared to enter. Arriving home to our titular heroine, Mandy, who is hard at work on a pretty gnarly sketch, Red immediately changes into a man at peace when he embraces her, showing their amazing pastoral life in this small but beautiful cabin in the woods. But Red has a strange feeling about where they live, as he voices after having a clearly very bad and weird dream, which, I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit too obvious to think that maybe he dreamed the whole thing and that maybe the whole thing is, like, cyclical or something like that. That the part where he wakes up from that dream, the whole thing has already happened and that's what he experiences in the dream and he just lives it over and over and over again. I don't know. That was just something that I kind of picked out of that. I won't go too hard in this. I want to give you guys the broad strokes, and then I think what I'm going to do is have you guys tell me what you think about the movie or any questions you have about it. I'm going to address some more later because it was a very dense movie, and there's a lot to it, and I feel like it's something that takes... You can't just watch it over and over and over again in the same period of time. You have to be in a different mindset to pick up different things. So that's why I kind of want to reach out to you guys for fresh minds to pick on what you took out of it. Even on Beyond the Black Rainbow, because that one's even more cryptic than this one. So the next day, while on a walk, Mandy encounters a van, and the audience encounters another title card, which reads, Children of the New Dawn. So inside of the van are a bunch of burnt-out, hippie-looking derelicts, and the most spaced out of whom is obsessively staring at Mandy as she walks by them, and she looks very terrified when she looks back at him. So next scene, outside of a Roach Motel, that same van is parked outside. And the spaced-out gentleman named Jeremiah Sand is laying in the bed in the room, pining for Mandy. Ooh, I feel naked without her. Saying that he can't get her out of his mind. And he tells his apparent right-hand man, Lieutenant Brother Swan, to get the Horn of Abraxas so they can take care of his needs. Then telling him to send in the young woman in their commune for God only knows what depravity, because it thankfully cuts to the convenience store where Mandy works right after that. Thankfully. I can only imagine he did something fucking disgusting with the state of mind he was in, and the power and control he had over all those people with him. Which wasn't that many people. I think it was like 7 altogether. Alright, so in the convenience store, one of the older women from the cult has come in to see Mandy, because she's clearly jealous that Jeremiah yearns for Mandy and not her. So she pokes and prods at her like Dr. Barry kind of did to Elena. But while she's doing this, she knows exactly what doom awaits Mandy. And I don't think she's very happy about it, because Jeremiah definitely wants to recruit her. And I don't think she wants another woman around that Jeremiah has eyes for. I think she, even though she's a fucking hag, wants him to only be in love with her, but he does not even give a fuck about her. like there's one line where she's talking, she's like, oh, please, Jeremiah, what did I do wrong? You do everything wrong. He hates this chick's guts, and I think that she's more upset about that than anything else. Not specifically Mandy. Alright, so later on at night, in the van, Brother Swan and a younger member use the Horn of Abraxas. They have to wait a little while, but the Horde shows up to provide the muscle they need. These men are bikers that... The closest description I have to what they are is a drug-induced Cenobite. They're just in like a perpetual state of psychedelic hell. They even scare the shit out of Brother Swan. But he does get out of the van and greet them regardless, and offers the leader a mason jar of what must be drugs or maybe blood or both, because he gulps it down and says, blood for blood. So cut back to the cabin where Red is outside enjoying a smoke. He seems to have a sense that something is off in the distance, but merely flicks out his butt and returns inside. He should have listened to that gut feeling, because while they were asleep, the Cenobikers, the Cenobites of Anarchy, and that's Cenobikers with a Y, from before if you were wondering, they descend into their bedroom and rip them out of their bed, and rip them from their slumber, and knock Red unconscious and take Mandy away. She awakens tied to a kitchen chair and is dosed with some super acid, like from inside of a tincture administered into her eyeball by that same older woman who was in the store earlier, and ending it with a sting from this gigantic bug that was fermenting in a mason jar of the drugs that she calls the cherry on top. So by this point, Mandy is in fucking La La Land, and not that movie that didn't win Best Picture, Moonlight. Come up here, you won. Fuck La La Land. So she is then dumped into a room filled with Jeremiah, Brother Swan, and all the other cronies. Jeremiah pleads his love to her, expecting to have a new member of his commune, like I said before. He then shows her his music from before he found his higher purpose, even though it seems like he was just having a fancy way of saying that everyone laughed him out of the music industry and he just went crazy and like basically turned into a less successful Charles Manson. So he exposes himself to her both physically and through his insanely hypnotic pitch for his organization, which I gotta say, like I said, it's very hypnotic. Like I'd have a tough time not listening to him if I was on whatever the fuck she was on, which Panos showed very well with the way he shot this scene. It was literally like being on fucking acid. But all this only makes her laugh. I don't know if it was the drugs she was on, she's crazy, or a mix of both. Or maybe it was just, like, kind of funny that this Jesus freak got his start trying to be a rock star who sang this song about how divine he is. Jeremiah Sand was a righteous man whose heart is full of love. I can't lie. I've been listening to it a lot because it's on iTunes. You should check it out. What's it called? Give me 1 second here because I want to tell you what the name of the song is. Because it's like a fake version of it you kind of hear in the fucking movie because she's on the drugs and you're experiencing the sound through the drugs. It's called Amulet of the Weeping Maze by Jeremiah Sand, and it's so fucking catchy. You got to check it out. But as she starts laughing, obviously, Jeremiah Sand is very displeased, to say the least, demanding that all of his followers avert their eyes while she mocks him. And he has to have a little powwow with himself in the mirror, asking, what do I do? 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 And then, like, I don't know what it is about, like, these drugs that they take. It's like there's some, like, God inside of them that takes control and fucking tells them what to do. So, cut to the tree outside where Red is bound and gagged with barbed wire. They all exit. Jeremiah was still clearly very emotional, judging from his running eyeliner, and telling him that they know nothing of love, forcing that same young woman from earlier to get on her knees and fire a revolver with one live round inside at her head, which she does. Luckily, there is no bullet in the fucking immediate chamber. Now, if that isn't love, I do not know what is. Brother Swan then shows him the tainted blade of the pale night, straight from the abyssal lair, which Jeremiah then uses like any old blade to plant in Red's guts, telling him that they would pay for wasting a dose of the chemist's finest. And that comes in the form of them stringing Mandy up in a sleeping bag to the tree Red is bound to and setting it on fire until only ash remained, vividly showing Red's anguished reaction along with the giddy and awe-inspired members of the cult, and Jeremiah, who just seems to be meditating on the event, before leaving Red tied to his fence and behind for good, or what they think will be for good, they'll wish is for good. Red slips his mangled wrists through the wire and is finally able to crawl his way over to the pile of dust that used to be his wife, and then back into the home that isn't his home anymore. Now I'm gonna talk about the Cheddar Goblin, which is an amazing little fucking like doorway or through the keyhole, whatever, into Wonderland. Because once you see this fucking Cheddar Goblin macaroni and cheese commercial, it literally just goes fucking insane. The movie just gets turned from fucking, like, you think it's on 10, but it turned out it was really on 5, and it gets turned up to fucking 11 after the Cheddar Goblin scene. But I'm sorry, but this is where I'm going to have to stop on the final card, which matches the title of the film, Mandy. Because I know I said I'm disregarding spoilers, but I refuse to give any details of Red's revenge, any precise details. Because if I've wound this up for you properly, you need to see this for yourself. Not only would I miss aspects of it, I would do these sequences absolutely zero justice. Because it's not simply a meme of Nicolas Cage, like, yelling, going, "Wah! Wah!" Like everyone seems to be trying to make it out to be. It's like an insanely nuanced performance that may be, like, the best in his, like, telephone book-sized resume. I mean, so I'm sorry to be a cock tease, but the revenge bits on top of the cameos from Bill Duke and Richard Brake, are all things that have to be seen to be truly appreciated. I can't describe it. Like, I can tell you the beginning of the movie because it's all just story and setup. But all I'll say is that Richard Brake is amazing as the chemist, and Bill Duke all but confirms my theory that Red is ex-military. And if this wasn't a cock tease to you, then maybe I just saved from paying money to see the movie. Although I don't see how it's possible. But hey, I've seen people with that opinion, and they're more than entitled to it. A lot of people are saying that it's kind of a step backward for Panos as far as storytelling goes, but I don't know. What I gave you is about all there is of the actual story, and after that, it's just like a dog with rabies let off its leash. I think it's just like a different style of story than people are used to. Like, you get a big, dense chunk at the beginning, like I told you pretty much everything that is the story, and then the rest is all just fucking visceral. Like, you watch, like, all you're doing is just watching, like, I can't even fucking describe it, honestly. You need to see it. And also, I would be totally remiss if I failed to mention the immaculate score by Jóhann Jóhannsson, who is unfortunately no longer with us. He died in February. I think he was only 48 or something. He was in his 40s. He just completely... He also did Arrival. His score was honestly the only piece I really liked of that movie. I'm sorry, if you're a fan, I really did not care for Arrival. But he did Prisoners. He did... what else? I know I'm missing some other really good stuff. He did Sicario, too. That's what it was. He was amazing, and he's definitely going to be missed. Because he completely understood what Panos is going for. And I saw the movie 3 times, and I'm not even sure what it was that he was going for. And he did this before the movie was even finished. And he adds more in the second half than the dialogue even can. Because there's such little dialogue in the second half. It's so heavily action-driven and music-driven. Like I said, you need to see this to believe it. You need to see it to believe it. You don't need to see it in theaters, because I know it's kind of difficult to see it in theaters. I'm kind of in a conundrum where I really can't afford to take a day off of work, and it's really not playing at any time that's convenient for me. And I'm trying to save up to go to Halloween Horror Nights, and I'm not taking any time off of work to see a movie that I can get on VOD. So that's what I did. And if you're in the same conundrum, don't feel bad about it. Just do it. See it. I mean, some bits are literally like you have the film muted and, like, you're just playing the perfect Doom record over it. Just perfect for Red conquests the crazy evil. I mean, there's really not too much more to be said about this. Panos Cosmatos, like, I mean, this is his first movie in 8 years, and I think he's fucking like 52 years old. So, I mean, I'm not really expecting anything in the near future from him. I'm not expecting anything crazy. I think he's just going to keep on doing what he wants to do like this. And I have no problem with that. It's kind of like the same thing I've said about the Venture Bros in the past. I'm very willing to be patient as long as he keeps on delivering the goods after the long wait. It's the same thing with Quentin Tarantino, too. Like, even if he retires after this next movie or one more movie after that, like, I'll be happy. Everything was good. I mean, some I like better than others, but everything was good. So, I mean, again, I'm sorry if I was a little bit of a cock tease, and I know I said that I was going to go fully in-depth on Mandy, but I would like to discuss it again in some more depth and detail. Because, like I said, I'd like to watch it again from another perspective, and I can't get it from another perspective in, like, the same week. And tell me what you thought about it, and tell me what you'd like to hear me talk about, and, like, some questions maybe you had about it that I could look back at and try and answer. Well, I think that we went pretty goddamn in-depth on Panos Cosmatos' very tiny resume, which definitely just became a lot more of a lucrative commodity, because, I mean, there is so much goddamn buzz behind this movie, and, I mean, it's an experience either way. You can't deny that. It's either it's either going to be like the first time you had sex, or it's going to be like the first time you saw somebody get beaten, like, really badly. I mean, I don't know, maybe if you haven't ever seen that, with something traumatizing. So, I mean, you just got to jump into this one head first. I mean, if you've listened to this, I'm sure that the movie's piqued your interest pretty decently. And if you're here with me right now, I'm positive that it's piqued your interest, even if you're on the fence about watching it. And that's why I didn't fucking spoil the last half of the movie, because I can't, in good conscience, do that. So, what you need to do is go out and see Panos Cosmatos' Mandy and report back to me and say, fuck you, or fuck yeah, I love that. Well, until next time, this is Doc signing out.